Okay, hang on. Before you smirk and scroll past, I need you to sit with something for a second. This is not just a joke video. It is also one of the most quietly incredible stories our species has ever produced, and almost nobody tells it because everyone is too embarrassed to. Here is the thing. Every single human who has ever lived did this. Cleopatra did this. Julius Caesar did this, probably mid-speech, knowing him. Aristotle, who we will get to, and who had opinions about absolutely everything, did this. And yet you can read 1,000 pages about ancient Rome and never once find out what a Roman actually did after lunch. That is a gap, and today we are filling it, which is a phrase I already regret. We are going back. The Indus Valley, ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, medieval Europe, Han, China. We are going everywhere. And we are going to find out exactly what people used, what they built, what they believed, and some of the genuinely unhinged things ancient writers said about human waste that will make you grateful you were born after indoor plumbing. This is the video nobody made until now. Let's go. First, let's clear something up, because it changes how you see everything that follows. The way a civilization dealt with its waste is one of the best measures of how advanced it actually was. Not its temples, not its armies, its drains. Building a pyramid is a one-time flex. Keeping a city of 50,000 people from drowning in their own sewage every single day, for centuries, that is real engineering. That is the boring genius history forgets. And when you look closely at ancient sanitation, you find two kinds of societies. The ones that solved it, quietly and brilliantly, thousands of years before you would expect. And the ones that did not, and paid for it in ways that shaped their entire history. Keep that tension in mind as we go. Clever or catastrophic? It decided a lot more than you would think. Let's start with the Indus Valley, because the Indus Valley is about to embarrass every civilization that comes after it in this video. Around 4,500 years ago, in cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, in what is now Pakistan and northwest India, people were living with sanitation that much of Europe would not match until the 1800s. Let that sink in. Many houses in Mohenjo-daro had their own private toilet, a seat positioned over a drain, connected to a covered sewer system running beneath the streets. Waste flowed out of the home into brick-lined channels and away from where people actually lived. There were drainage grates. There were what looked like inspection points for clearing blockages. 4,500 years ago, this is a civilization that looked at human waste and decided it deserved a system, and then built one so good that archaeologists are still a little stunned by it. We cannot fully read the Indus script yet, so we do not know what they thought about any of this in their own words, but we do not really need their words. The drains say enough. Sometimes the most impressive thing a civilization leaves behind is not a temple, it is a pipe. Now compare that to ancient Egypt, which is excelling at almost everything else and is a bit more mixed here. Wealthy Egyptians had real toilets. Limestone seats, sometimes, positioned over a container of sand that a servant would empty. Some homes had a small dedicated room built around it, very civilized. The problem, as always, is that most people were not wealthy. For ordinary Egyptians, it was simpler. A pot, a corner, the river, the fields. And here's a detail that tells you something about how differently they thought about the body. Egyptian medicine took the bowels extremely seriously. They believed a huge range of diseases came from rotting matter inside the body, and the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts we have, is genuinely obsessed with laxatives and enemas. There was even a royal official whose title translates to something close to guardian of the royal bowel movement. That was a real job. Someone woke up every morning in ancient Egypt, put on fine linen, and went to work managing the pharaoh's digestion. In a society convinced your gut could kill you, that might have been one of the more important jobs at court. Ancient Greece gives us democracy, geometry, theater, and Aristotle deciding he understands the human body when he very much does not. We will get back to him, because he has earned it. On the practical side, the Greeks were sensible. Cities like Athens had public latrines and drainage systems. Wealthy homes kept chamber pots and dedicated spaces for them. At drinking parties, the Symposia, a guest would sometimes simply call for the pot and use it in the room while the conversation carried on around them. Picture that. Some of the most refined philosophical discussion in human history, briefly interrupted so a guest could use a bowl in the corner. The Greeks did not find this strange. We would find this extremely strange. That gap between what they shrugged at and what horrifies us now is basically what this whole video is about. And now, Rome. If the Indus Valley is the quiet genius of this story, Rome is the loud, chaotic, magnificent, disgusting main character. Rome built public sanitation at a scale nobody had attempted before. The Cloaca Maxima, one of the oldest sewer systems in the world, was so central to the city that Romans gave it its own goddess, Cloacina, who you could go and worship if your particular devotion happened to be the divine spirit of the sewer. Rome also built enormous public toilets, some seating dozens of people at once on long stone benches with holes cut straight into them. No stalls, no partitions, no privacy whatsoever. You sat shoulder to shoulder with strangers and did your business while discussing politics, business, and gossip, because in Rome, the public latrine functioned as a social space. Then there is the Tersorium, the detail everyone remembers, so let's deal with it properly. To clean themselves in public latrines, Romans used a sea sponge fixed to the end of a stick. That part is fine. That part is genuinely clever. The part that ruins people is that in many public facilities, that sponge on a stick was shared. One sponge, communal, rinsed at best in a channel of running water or a bucket of vinegar, then passed along to the next person. From where we are standing, this is a nightmare. From a Roman's perspective, this was just Tuesday. And here is a fun fact that surprises people. There is a real theory among historians that the phrase for getting the wrong end of the stick may be connected, at least loosely, to exactly the object you are now picturing. Historians argue about this endlessly, which honestly is the only reason I feel comfortable telling you about it. Before we move on from Rome, we need to deal with the man himself, Pliny the Elder. Rome's great encyclopedist, author of a 37-volume natural history, and a man who never once let a lack of evidence slow down a confident claim. Ancient writers in general had a habit of assigning waste strange, almost magical properties, and Pliny leaned into it harder than most. Excrement shows up constantly across ancient medicine, in more than one culture, as an ingredient in remedies for everything from eye conditions to infections. There are Egyptian prescriptions involving animal dung. There are later European ones too. A few of these treatments may have accidentally contained something that did something. Most of them did not, and a fair number of them likely made people sicker. But the instinct behind it is telling. Ancient people looked at the one thing every human produces and every human finds repellent, and a lot of them decided that meant it must be powerful. That is a very human move. We still do it, with other things we do not fully understand either. Which brings us to the part of this story that shaped it more than any drain or sponge ever could. Belief. Across a wide range of cultures, waste was never purely a plumbing question, it was a purity question. In many religious traditions, contact with human waste made a person ritually unclean, requiring washing or ceremony before they could pray, cook, or return to normal life. Cultures developed careful rules about which hand to use, how far from water and food you needed to go, which direction to face. None of this was random. Strip away the ritual language and a surprising number of these rules are quietly functional public health policy. Keep waste away from drinking water. Wash before eating. Do not do this anywhere near food preparation. Ancient people had no concept of germ theory. They had no idea why any of it worked. But over enough generations, the communities that treated waste as dangerous and kept it far from their water tended to survive more and get sick less. The belief showed up dressed as religion. Underneath, it was one of the oldest safety systems our species ever built. And running through every single culture in this video is one line that never moves: class. The rich always had it better. In the Indus Valley, the good houses had the private toilets. In Egypt, the wealthy had the limestone seats and the servants to empty them. In Rome, the rich had private facilities at home and never had to share a stone bench with 40 strangers and one sponge. This gap shows up again in medieval Europe, where castles had garderobes, small stone toilet chutes built into the outer walls that let waste drop straight down into the moat or a pit below. If you have ever wondered why moats were not exactly popular swimming spots, now you know. Wealthy medieval households used chamber pots emptied by servants. Everyone else used a shared outdoor privy or, in crowded towns, simply opened a window and threw the contents of a pot into the street below, sometimes with the polite warning "Gardez-l'eau," a corruption of a French phrase roughly meaning "watch out for the water." It was not water. Medieval European towns eventually built a profession around cleaning this up. Night soil men worked at night, collecting waste from cesspits and privies and hauling it out of the city, because doing this job during daylight in front of your neighbors was apparently a step too far, even in the medieval world. Here is where things flip completely, though, because while Europe was throwing waste out of windows, Han and Tang Dynasty China had built something close to genius. In parts of ancient and imperial China, human waste, known as night soil, was collected, carted out to farmland, and sold as fertilizer. This was not a workaround. It was a functioning economy. Farmers paid for it. Collectors specialized in it. Cities organized around moving it efficiently from where people lived to where crops grew. It is, genuinely, one of the smartest waste solutions in this entire video, and it barely gets mentioned next to Rome's sewers, probably because fertilizer is a much harder sell than a goddess. So, what does all of this actually add up to? First, humans were never passive about this. Every civilization we have looked at built a system, a belief, or both, in response to something the body does every single day, whether you plan for it or not. Second, the real story here is never really the waste itself. It is engineering and class. The technology existed almost everywhere. What decided your daily experience was how rich you were and what your society believed about purity. Third, the people writing history rarely thought this topic was worth writing about, which is exactly why so much of it survives only in drains, latrine ruins, and the occasional outraged religious text rather than in the history books you read in school. And fourth, sanitation, or the lack of it, is one of the most consequential and least celebrated forces in human history. Poor sanitation spread disease that shaped the size of cities, the length of lives, and the outcomes of wars, long before anyone understood why. We have entire museums dedicated to ancient swords. We reconstruct ancient battle formations in painstaking detail. We make documentary after documentary about emperors and generals. But the one experience every single person in every single one of those documentaries shared, every day, without exception, barely gets a sentence. That is the gap this video was built to close. So next time someone acts like this topic is beneath discussion, remind them that Cleopatra had this figured out. Roman senators had this figured out, badly, with a shared sponge. Medieval kings had a stone chute for exactly this purpose built into their own castle walls. It is not a gross question. It is one of the oldest questions there is, and every human who has ever lived has answered it, one way or another, every single day.